Developing tonight here at 6, the federal government has ramped up operations in Minnesota following new allegations of fraud there. Good evening, I'm Preston Phillips.
And I'm Mary Nom. Homeland Security posted new video of agents reportedly going door to door at suspected fraud sites, mostly run by the Somali community that received millions of taxpayer dollars. FBI Director Kash Patel promised a surge of resources to investigate, and lawmakers in the House are expanding their own investigation.
The young man thought he was going to the mosque for spiritual guidance. 19-year-old Ahmed Ibrahim had been struggling, dropped out of community college, couldn't find steady work, felt disconnected from both his Somali heritage and American society. His mother had urged him to speak with Imam Yusuf at the Al-Rahman Islamic Center, the large mosque in South Minneapolis, where their family had prayed for years. It was a Thursday evening in October when Ahmed walked into the imam's office for what he thought would be religious counseling. Imam Yusuf Muhammad, a 52-year-old Somali religious leader respected throughout the Minneapolis community, greeted him warmly and asked him to sit. "Your mother tells me you're searching for purpose," the imam said in Somali, his voice gentle and paternal. "Tell me what troubles you." Ahmed explained his frustrations, feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, struggling financially, watching his younger siblings go to college while he worked minimum wage jobs that barely covered his car payment. The imam listened patiently, nodding with understanding. Then he said something Ahmed didn't expect. "What if I told you there's a way you could earn $5,000 per week? Enough to help your family, buy a car, build a future? Would you be interested?" Ahmed was confused. "What kind of work?" Imam Yusuf leaned forward. "Work that serves our community. Work that fights against the corrupt Western system that keeps our people poor. Allah has provided us with resources to resist oppression. Some call it haram, but I'm telling you, it's jihad. Economic jihad against a society that exploits us." Over the next hour, the imam explained that he could give Ahmed a job making deliveries. Ahmed would pick up packages from the mosque, drive them to addresses across the Twin Cities, and return with cash. The packages contained medicine. The imam used that word specifically, that people needed but couldn't afford through legal channels. Ahmed was young, but he wasn't stupid. He understood what the imam was really offering. "You want me to sell drugs?" The imam's expression hardened. "I'm offering you a purpose, a way to serve your community and resist the system that marginalizes us. You can choose poverty and irrelevance, or you can choose power and purpose. But if you refuse, you don't speak of this conversation to anyone. Do you understand?" Ahmed felt trapped. This was his imam, a man his family trusted, a community leader, someone who'd led prayers at his grandfather's funeral. If he refused and told someone, who would believe him over the imam? And part of him, the desperate, struggling part, was tempted by the money. Ahmed made a choice that would haunt him for months. He said yes. What Ahmed didn't know was that Imam Yusuf Muhammad and his wife Khadija weren't just recruiting one young man. They were recruiting hundreds. And the Al-Rahman Islamic Center, a mosque serving 8,000 Somali families, respected throughout Minneapolis, recipient of government grants for refugee services, wasn't a house of worship. It was the largest urban drug distribution center in the United States, a 1.8 billion CJNG cartel operation hidden behind the sacred walls of a mosque. If this opening has you questioning how a mosque could be used this way, tap like and comment Mosque Cartel so I know you're following. Because what DEA uncovered was the ultimate perversion of trust and faith. The Al-Rahman Islamic Center sits in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood of Minneapolis, the heart of the city's Somali community. The mosque was built in 2014 with donations from the community and grants from interfaith organizations. It's a large facility. The main prayer hall can hold 200 worshipers, and attached to it is a community center with classrooms, offices, a kitchen, and a basement that was supposed to be used for storage. Imam Yusuf Muhammad had been the mosque's religious leader since it opened. He was a charismatic figure, educated in Islamic studies in Saudi Arabia, fluent in Arabic, Somali, and English, and deeply involved in Minneapolis's interfaith community. He spoke at churches, synagogues, and civic events about religious tolerance and refugee integration. He counseled families, performed marriages, led funeral prayers, and was trusted by thousands. His wife, Khadija Hassan, 48, managed the mosque's charitable operations, organizing food drives, coordinating refugee assistance programs, and running youth programs that supposedly helped young Somali Americans stay connected to their faith and culture. Together, they appeared to be pillars of the community. The mosque received $2.3 million in government grants over 6 years for refugee services and community programs. Politicians visited for photo opportunities. News articles praised the mosque's work, helping refugees integrate into American society. But according to federal investigators, the entire operation was a front. Imam Yusuf and Khadija had been working for Mexico's Jalisco New Generation Cartel since 2018, and they'd transformed the mosque into one of the most sophisticated drug distribution hubs in America. The scheme was brilliant in its simplicity and its exploitation of trust. The cartel needed urban distribution centers in major cities, places where large quantities of drugs could be stored, divided into smaller packages, and distributed to street dealers. But warehouses attract attention, stash houses get raided, commercial properties raise suspicions. A mosque, however, was perfect. Religious buildings are protected by the First Amendment. Law enforcement avoids surveilling them unless absolutely necessary to avoid accusations of religious persecution. Neighbors wouldn't question truck traffic at a mosque because faith communities regularly receive charitable donations. And critically, the community would never suspect their spiritual leaders of criminal activity. CJNG had approached Imam Yusuf in 2018 with a straightforward proposition: allow the mosque to be used for drug storage and distribution, recruit young Somali men as dealers, and receive $250,000 monthly. Over 6 years, Imam Yusuf and Khadija would receive approximately $18 million in cartel payments. The distribution operation ran through the mosque's infrastructure. Cartel shipments would arrive in semi-trucks marked as charitable donations or humanitarian supplies for Somalia. The mosque legitimately collected donations for Somali relief, so these trucks were expected and unremarkable. The trucks would back up to the mosque's loading dock, and the cargo would be unloaded by mosque volunteers, actually cartel operatives, and taken to the basement and back rooms where drugs would be stored in climate-controlled conditions. Several times per week, street dealers would come to the mosque during prayer times. They'd enter through the main entrance like any worshiper, perform abbreviated prayers to maintain appearance, then be directed by mosque staff to back rooms where they'd receive drug packages. They'd leave through side exits, packages concealed in bags or under clothing, looking like community members who'd attended prayer. To surveillance cameras, neighbors, or anyone watching, it appeared to be normal mosque activity, people arriving for prayer and leaving afterward. No one suspected that prayer times were actually drug pickup schedules. If you're beginning to understand how this operation weaponized religious trust, comment sacred betrayal and hit-like. Because the corruption went deeper than just using the mosque as a warehouse. Imam Yusuf wasn't just allowing the mosque to be used for distribution, he was actively recruiting young Somali men to work as street dealers, using religious authority and manipulation to convince them they were serving a higher purpose. The counseling sessions where he recruited Ahmed Ibrahim weren't isolated incidents. Over 6 years, Imam Yusuf had recruited approximately 340 young Somali men, most between ages 16 and 24, to work as dealers for the cartel. His recruitment pitch was always similar. He'd identify young men who were struggling financially, disconnected, or searching for purpose. He'd offer them counseling, build trust through religious discussion, then gradually introduce the idea that dealing drugs was a form of resistance against a corrupt Western system that marginalized Muslims and refugees. He'd frame drug dealing as economic jihad, telling recruits they were fighting back against American society that kept their community poor. He'd cite verses from the Quran taken wildly out of context to justify the work. He'd tell them that selling drugs to non-Muslims was acceptable because it weakened the corrupt system. It was theological manipulation of the most cynical kind, using religious authority to convince vulnerable young men that crime was actually righteous action. Many recruits initially resisted, but the Imam had leverage. He was their spiritual leader, someone their families respected. If they refused and told their families, who would believe them? And for young men desperate for money and purpose, the combination of religious justification and financial reward was persuasive. The DEA investigation that would eventually expose the mosque operation began not with suspicion of Imam Yusuf, but with the arrest of a low-level dealer in June 2023. 22-year-old Mohammed Hassan was caught with 2 kilograms of fentanyl during a traffic stop in Minneapolis. Facing serious federal charges, he agreed to cooperate. During his debriefing, Mohammed told agents something that shocked them. "I get my product from the mosque, Al-Rahman Islamic Center. I pick it up during evening prayer." DEA agents were initially skeptical. Mosques weren't typically involved in drug distribution, and making false accusations against religious institutions could create massive legal and political problems. But Mohammed was insistent. He described the process. He named Imam Yusuf as the person who'd recruited him months earlier during a counseling session. DEA opened a preliminary investigation, carefully documenting Mohammed's claims and looking for corroborating evidence. They conducted surveillance from distant positions, watching the mosque without approaching it, and what they observed supported Mohammed's story. During evening prayer times, they documented individuals arriving, staying briefly, and leaving with bags or packages. Some of these individuals were known drug dealers from DEA databases. The pattern was suspicious. These weren't people coming for spiritual reasons. They were making pickups. Investigators also observed truck deliveries to the mosque several times per week. The trucks were marked as charitable donation vehicles, but surveillance showed they arrived at unusual hours, late night or early morning, when legitimate charity deliveries typically wouldn't occur. Financial investigation revealed that Imam Yusuf and Khadija had assets totaling approximately $24 million. Homes in Minneapolis, Dubai, and Kenya, luxury vehicles, and offshore accounts. The Imam's mosque salary was $85,000 annually. The wealth was impossible to explain through legitimate income. Before we continue with the DEA raid, I need to be honest with you. Investigations like this require enormous resources to research properly. This isn't just retelling headlines. This is weeks of analyzing religious institution protections, cartel operations, and ensuring accuracy. We're a small team bringing you stories others won't explore. Stories about how sacred institutions can be corrupted and how trust can be weaponized. If you want us to keep making these investigations, consider joining our channel membership. Your support funds the research that makes this possible. Members get early access and exclusive content. Click the join button. Now let's continue with the raid that exposed a mosque-turned-cartel warehouse. Planning the raid on Al Rahman Islamic Center required extraordinary sensitivity. Raiding a mosque could create accusations of religious persecution, inflame community tensions, and spark protests. But the evidence was overwhelming. The mosque was a major drug distribution hub, and delaying action would allow more drugs to reach the streets. DEA coordinated with community leaders, briefing trusted Somali elders about the investigation to prepare them for what was coming. They also coordinated with the U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure legal protocols for raiding a religious institution were followed precisely. The raid was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November 2023 at 5 a.m. before morning prayers began, but after overnight cartel operations would have concluded. At 5 a.m., DEA tactical teams surrounded Al Rahman Islamic Center. Agents breached multiple entrances simultaneously, securing the facility before anyone inside could destroy evidence. Imam Yusuf and Khadija were arrested in their private office, found shredding documents and attempting to wipe hard drives. The scene inside the mosque was shocking. The main prayer hall, the sacred space where thousands came to worship, appeared normal. But in the basement and attached community center, agents found a massive drug operation. The basement contained 4 tons of fentanyl, vacuum-sealed in packages and stored on industrial shelving. A climate control system kept temperature and humidity optimal for drug storage. Security cameras monitored the space, though they'd been positioned to avoid showing the prayer hall itself, maintaining the illusion that the criminal operation was separate from worship. In back rooms of the community center, agents found packaging stations where bulk drugs were divided into street-level quantities, scales, vacuum sealers, and supplies. One room contained approximately $8 million in cash, payment from dealers for product received. The Imam's office contained the most damning evidence. Ledgers documented 6 years of operations, drug quantities received, amounts distributed, dealers who'd picked up product, and payments received from the cartel. Communications equipment showed ongoing coordination with CJNG leadership in Mexico. The jury deliberated 10 hours, guilty on all counts: racketeering, drug trafficking conspiracy, money laundering, and exploiting minors, for recruiting dealers under 18. Imam Yusuf Muhammad was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. Khadija Hassan received 45 years. The 340 young men they'd recruited faced various charges depending on their level of involvement. Those who dealt large quantities faced serious time, while others who'd made minimal deliveries received lighter sentences or diversion programs. The impact on Minneapolis's Somali community was devastating. 8,000 families had worshipped at Al Rahman, trusted the Imam, sent their children to youth programs, and believed they were part of a sacred institution. The revelation that their mosque had been a cartel warehouse shattered faith and trust. Tonight, several truths demand attention. First, sacred institutions can be corrupted when leadership betrays trust. Religious authority is powerful, And when weaponized for crime, the damage extends beyond individual victims to entire communities. Second, criminals exploit protections meant to preserve religious freedom. The First Amendment's protections are essential, but they can be abused by those hiding crimes behind faith. Third, recruitment of vulnerable youth through religious manipulation is among the most cynical forms of exploitation. Young people seeking purpose and guidance deserve protection, not predation. And finally, we must ask, how do we protect religious freedom while preventing sacred spaces from being weaponized? If you believe religious leaders who exploit faith for crime deserve maximum punishment, tap like. If you believe religious institutions need better oversight mechanisms, comment, protect sacred spaces. And if you want us to keep exposing these betrayals, subscribe, join our membership, and share this video. Because the fight to protect communities from exploitation isn't over. Not in Minneapolis, not in faith communities, and not anywhere that trust and sacred authority can be perverted for profit.